I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
Oh, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
Welcome to Big Little Lessons. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Christine, and together we have over 50 years of experience teaching elementary school.
And we believe the lessons we teach and learn in kindergarten stay with us for a lifetime. So the question is, what if the hardest behaviors we see are actually rooted in the deepest wounds?
Today we're talking about empathy, what it means to truly see someone who, even when their story is hard to understand.
We are joined by Amanda Feldman, a therapist working inside a men's maximum security prison where she supports the individuals navigating addiction, trauma, and healing.
This is a conversation about looking beneath the surface and remembering that every person has a story.
Amanda, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, before we dive into your powerful story, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey, how you were first drawn to the work of counseling?
Sure. So I actually was in therapy myself when I was younger, and I always wanted to be a teacher when I was little, actually.
I didn't know that.
Well, now you know. And unfortunately, my dad discouraged that. And eventually along the way, I was in my own therapy and had a really great experience and decided that was maybe the way I wanted to work with people. It was just a natural inclination. And so how I ended up where I'm working now was a wild ride. It wasn't planned. I went into a master's in social work to become a therapist in private practice, hang my shingle, and just work with what I call the worried well, because we all have problems and go through things. A licensed therapist, sort of like doctors have a residency, you have to complete a certain number of hours under supervision. And I did that in community mental health. And so I was working with youth and families mostly in the foster care system or in more like urban communities and inner city communities. I loved working with adolescents, and my supervisor at the time knew that. We had a couple of partnerships with local high schools and some group homes. A lot of the teens in those group homes were there through the foster care system, but many were placed there through the probation and juvenile justice system. And I loved working with them. Eventually, the company I worked for had a contract with a juvenile detention facility. When that position became available, I applied for it because I had loved working with those particular youth so much. And then I was there for about 4 years and loved it. I felt like I found my purpose. The contract dissolved between the agency I was working for and the facility. And so at that point, I knew I wanted to stay in corrections and found my current place of employment.
So how long have you been there?
So I've been here for 5 years.
Wow. And did you work with both men and women?
Yeah. So primarily in juvenile hall and where I'm at currently at the prison, I work primarily with men. The juvenile facility did have a small population of female adolescents, and every once in a while I'd work with one of them. And at the prison, the program I work for also has a telemedicine team, and everybody, whether we're on site or work remotely, still sometimes offers coverage to some of the other prisons. So every once in a while, I'll see a woman at one of the women's prisons.
Okay. But primarily you drive to the men's maximum security prison. How many days a week?
4 days a week.
4 days a week. And was that a big adjustment, or was it a notable adjustment leaving the youth to work with men?
I find that they're just like the kids I worked with in bigger, older bodies. Aren't
Like
we all?
kindergartners.
Yes. We say everybody's like a kindergartner.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all, right? So there are some differences, and some of the differences have less to do with age specifically. I mean, we can talk about things like arrested development, and not just because they're literally arrested, but trauma and life experiences. But the amount of time they've been incarcerated, so less their age. And when I worked in the juvenile facility, they were fighting their cases. They were waiting to have their cases adjudicated. I'm now on the prison side where they're serving their sentences. And so I think I've noticed a big difference in sort of how they move through their time, because they're not uncertain about what's going to happen with their case. And then, of course, like normal stages of development of like the human body and how that affects what we're going through psychologically, mentally, emotionally in different stages of life, right? I work with men. Some of the men I work with are in their 70s. And so what they're going through is so different, or how it impacts how they're doing their time if they have chronic medical conditions or chronic pain and things like that.
What surprised you most when you began this work in prison?
They're just people too, even in juvenile hall as well. But so many of them are really still in touch with their humanity in such a dehumanizing place. Yes. And they just, like any of us, yearn for connection and human relationship and to be understood. And they just have amazing stories that are worth knowing and hearing. And also, we just have a lot of fun. I think a lot of people wouldn't expect that. And maybe that's because I love my job so much and I love the people I work with so much. But we have so much fun, and it's so much fun for me. And like in their day-to-day life, like, yes, they're going through something really difficult, and it's a place where there's a lot of hopelessness and helplessness and pain and struggle that all of them come in with, and then continues to exist in that environment and sort of the microcosm of the world they came from. But just like any other person, they laugh and they joke and they have, happy moments and good experiences. And so I think that was not a bit of a surprise. I felt that in juvenile hall too, but when I first came into a correctional environment in the first place.
Yeah.
It's so important for us to hear this, because I think everybody has a preconceived notion of what it looks like or feels like or is to go to prison every day. And you're going to prison 4 days a week, and you just keep going back because of the joy it brings you, it sounds like to us.
Yes. Yeah. What keeps you going back week after week?
Oh, my patients.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I really love them so much.
How often do you meet with patients?
So in my role, I do assessments and also brief short-term therapy. My program is an addiction treatment program, which is separate from some of the other mental health services that are offered there. So the assessments, I might just see somebody one time, refer them to specific services within our program, and never see them again. I mean, at my prison, I see them around, but may never come into contact with them in the capacity of my role there. And then patients who are higher risk and need a little bit more intensive support in our program can be referred for some individual sessions, and I see them for 6 appointments every other week.
Okay.
But I work where they live, so I see a lot of them every day. Or if they need something and they stop me, or they want to check in, or some of them I check in on if I know they need, that little bit of extra support.
That's great.
I love what you called it, your purpose, and it brings you joy. So thank you for sharing all this.
When we met with you on Zoom last week to talk about the podcast, you stayed with me the whole week. Like everything you said, it was so clear that when you talk about this, how you light up and it's your purpose, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, because I watched a little bit of Orange is the New Black or Orange is Black, and it stressed me out. I was like, I can't watch this. So I'm so interested to delve into more about your work.
I'm excited to share.
So one of the things that we do with all of our guests is that we ask, what's one of your earliest school memories?
The first thing that came to mind is one of my dad's favorite stories about me, actually, and I think demonstrates from early on that I was meant to do what I do and become a therapist. So my second grade teacher, her name was Miss Case. I was always a teacher's pet. I always loved my teachers. I always wanted to be around them. I always wanted their attention and their praise and to be like, their little pet, right? Teacher's pet.
We don't have teachers' pets.
We love them all.
Don't lie. My grandma says about her grandchildren, she loves all of her grandchildren the same, but she likes them all differently.
Yes, that's a good way to say it.
Because I genuinely loved the acknowledgement and appreciation of adults in my life. And I think just the empathy that is inherently in me. Miss Case lost her mom while I was in her class. And so she was out on bereavement for whatever amount of time, I don't remember now. And when she came back, I must have been able to notice or see that she was sad, grieving, still moving through all of those emotions. And I went up to her and I said, little 7-year-old Amanda, Miss Case, I know you miss your mommy, but, and I pointed to my heart, she's always with you right here.
Oh, that's so thoughtful.
Yeah. So that is one that stands out, I think mostly because my dad repeats it a lot to people and shares it. But I do remember she was one of my favorite teachers. Always. And I think about her a lot. I think actually, even this is a ridiculous story. I think one time she used to tutor my younger brother. And so we had her phone number. So he's 2 years younger than me. So a few years later, she was tutoring him and we had her phone number and I loved her so much. I wanted to call her, but I was trying to do it from memory and I accidentally dialed 911. But I really, really loved her.
I'm sure she loved you too.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know for me, when I've had those sweet comments from young children, they just pierce your heart. So I'm sure that meant a lot to her to have you reach out to her about her. Your mom always lives in your heart.
Yeah, I hope so.
And it does really make sense that the early Amanda with the big empathetic heart is now sitting here with us today.
Yeah, so
Same
fascinating.
thing. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you said your parents discouraged you from teaching, but this was clearly your path and they have supported you in this path, right? Different.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, you are teaching your patients all sorts of things.
Very much
Yes.
so.
So,
Yes.
I mean, we really believe that the lessons that we teach and what we've learned in the classroom continue on and on and on. And that's what you're doing. So
yeah,
true.
there's a lot of crossover between, therapy and teaching, I think.
I think so.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think so.
And I use metaphors from school all the time, like when patients are trying to learn new skills or whether those skills are emotional, behavioral, or cognitive, things that they're working through and it feels new or different for them. I try to remind them, you don't just jump from second grade to fifth grade, or when we're looking at maybe something a choice that they made that they have regret about, when it's hard for them to talk about. One of the analogies I'll use is in school, right? When you get questions wrong on a test, you want to understand that and look at that, right? And it's not because you're a failure, it's because there's a skill you're still learning and developing and growing. So
there you go. There you go. Let's talk a little bit about the reality of prison life. So can you help us understand, what does daily life look like for the men that you counsel?
So they are woken up pretty early to go to breakfast. We call it chow.
Oh, chow.
They go to chow. Usually around chow starts, I would say about 6:37, the early morning. Some of the people in there have different jobs around the prison. And so the early morning workers will go to chow, and then building by building on each yard, they release for breakfast. And then after breakfast, it depends for each person what kind of of programming they're assigned to or involved in. But essentially, after breakfast, they go back to the building. If they're involved in school or GED or computer class or some sort of self-development group, things like that, then they'll go on their way at their scheduled times. There's different appointments as well. It's a whole little bustling community in a way. There's medical clinics, there's dental clinics. So if they have different appointments, they might go to those appointments in the morning, and later in the afternoon, there's yard time, recess. Recreation. So they may be out to yard. Part of their recreation might be inside. They call it day room time. So where they're out from their cells, but in the building. I think that about covers it. Oh, and that there's different times where they have to count them. Oh. Obviously, they need to be sure that everyone's accounted for. And so there are different increments throughout the day where they're back in their cells to be counted.
I was going to ask, how many hours are they in their cell versus daytime, recess time, chow time?
Honestly, they're out a lot of the day. I know that 4 o'clock count, they're in there about an hour from 4 to 5. All of the other count times, well, there's a 12 o'clock count, but that's only for specific individuals for different reasons that need to be accounted for a little bit more regularly. Most of the day, they're out if they have something going on or if they want to be at yard or out in the building. Some of them choose to stay inside. If they've received some recent disciplinary action, their status may be like a loss of privileges. And so those individuals would be in their cells basically the whole day unless they're going to an appointment.
Okay.
And then anyone in solitary confinement is in their cell essentially 23 hours a day. And then they have yard outside.
Oh, gosh. So
just in a cage, like segregated still, but they get to go outside for that amount of time.
I would imagine solitary confinement is brutal.
Isolation is, I don't know that that's so good for anybody. Some of them actually express that there are times where being able to get off of the yard and be in solitary confinement helps with getting sober or helps with being away from things that are going on the yard that they don't feel they can separate themselves from for different reasons. And so sometimes some of them will share that it gives them some peace of mind and an opportunity to just be with themselves. And there are things about it that are not nice.
Yeah, I'd imagine. There's so many layers and everybody's processing differently. So, okay.
But it's interesting how structured their days are. But I imagine that there's emotional and psychological challenges for them, like navigating all of this throughout the day. They're still having their feelings. What do you notice about that?
It's a great question. And it reminds me of something Brene Brown said in an interview once. She was asked, what if a patient says they don't want to talk about something that you're asking about? And the way she put it was, I would tell them they don't have to open that can of worms, but that can of worms is always there. And so to the point in your question of going through things emotionally, they are, but a lot of it's repressed. And that's something I notice the most. These are individuals who've learned to disconnect from and detach from their emotional world and their inner world for so many different reasons. And so in many ways, they can be very fragmented or disintegrated psychologically or emotionally. And that's where we see maybe sometimes a lot of the behavioral challenges, right? I always tell them it's sort of like whack-a-mole, right? Like the little gopher, right? Mm-hmm. It pops out and you whack them down, but it pops up over here. So a lot of the emotions that they may want or need to distance themselves from come out in other parts of their life.
I mean, we talk about that with little people too, behavior, what's behind behavior. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hopefully when we're working with our young students, we're helping them uncover whatever they need, what is behind the behavior. How does some of this early trauma show up later in adult life, especially in incarceration? You've said that they've done a lot of repressing. So can you talk about some of the behaviors?
Mm-hmm. Something I see maybe the most, because it's what I'm there to treat, is the substance dependence and the addiction. I think that's one of the biggest ways that trauma can manifest: aggression, violence, withdrawn, isolated, a lot of difficulty in socializing in healthy ways and forming meaningful connections. And then we're also talking about an environment that continues to be traumatizing. I mentioned earlier, there's still people, they're having also the full range of human experiences to a degree in a limited, controlled way. But their nervous system still always has to live in fight or flight mode, right? Like anything can happen and they'll be the first to tell you that. And so there's still a level of hypervigilance and being on edge, and they would probably deny this, but anxiety, the isolation from their families and the separation there, and some of the things that may still be going on in their outside life. And that's part of still being fragmented, right? They're straddling two worlds. And what do I have to do to navigate this world? And the expectations of that is different than what I need to do to get out of here one day, or to make it out of here safely, or what my family or loved ones may want for me and from me. And so they're having to hold all of that all the time, plus their whole history. So I used to say to my kids in juvenile hall, still comes to mind now, I really have noticed that confinement and incarceration seems to be a place where the past and the present and the future all seem to converge and get muddled up. And that can be really challenging.
I never thought about that, but yeah, they're dealing with so many different parts of their life.
Even the way they talk about being incarcerated, a lot of the language is like, I'm doing time or I've done time, right? So when you really think about it, there's this theme of time that really runs through. And I think that's a part of it.
When you
I drive my bus in a busy city. That's why road safety is so important to me. I know that I must slow down and be extra careful when I make a wide turn. Buses need more room than cars. Everyone can help keep our roads safe. Next time you're driving, remember to give buses plenty of time and space to finish turning before driving ahead. Let's all plan to share the road safely. Learn how at www.sharetheroadSafely.gov.
they would deny being anxious is because they don't want to seem vulnerable.
Could be.
Yeah.
Or they might not have the language for that. But that was more what I was thinking of, was like, I don't have anxiety. What are you talking about? Don't be putting that on a podcast.
Do you often find yourself thinking about the little boy inside the man?
Oh, all the time. Inner child work, I think, is such powerful therapeutic work. There's a model of therapy called internal family systems that speaks to that a little bit. But like I said, my answer to your question earlier about the difference between working with the youth and working with the adults, like they're just those kids in bigger, older bodies. Right. And I've actually seen some of my youth from juvenile hall that I worked with there now at the prison. I've been gone from juvenile hall long enough. They're now old enough, and unfortunately they've found themselves in the prison. But all the time they're longing for connection. Sometimes the role I'm in therapy, there's a lot of projecting that's happening in the therapeutic relationship. I always say as a therapist, I'm like a mirror, but I'm also a container. And sometimes I become the mom that they wish they had, or the significant other they wish they had, or the sister they wish they had, or the friend they wish they had, or something within themselves that they wish they could cultivate. It's an environment that epitomizes toxic masculinity. And then not just being a female, but I think I embody a lot of the feminine qualities of nurturing, caring, compassion. And so for them to be in the presence of that, I think sometimes creates safety. A lot of the time, sometimes it can be dysregulating for them. But either way, that's their inner child coming out saying, I needed this, or I needed it and I'm scared of it, so now I'm dysregulated. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does
but
make so much sense.
All the time, and most of their behaviors are their inner child acting out. And It can also be because those were behaviors they learned as a child to survive abuse, neglect, community violence. So it's there all the time. I think that's really they're walking around in big bodies, but they're still unhealed children. And I don't say that as a judgment of them like unhealed or damaged, but they never had opportunities for healing, or if they did, they didn't trust it. Maybe nobody asked them what happened or how can I help you? So,
Yeah.
So in your work with them, can you get them to notice that and understand that, about thinking about when they were younger and the trauma that they went through?
I'm very trauma informed. It's a tricky thing in this environment, right? Because I don't want to open old wounds in a way that then I understand once they leave my office, they have to put a different mask back on to go exist on a prison yard and in that environment. So it's a delicate balance of opening those wounds. I use an analogy of like surgery, but I still want to stitch you back up enough that you can go back out there and navigate that world. So it comes up all the time. Some are more open to that. Some are a little bit more resistant or a lot more resistant. I try to gauge, does this individual kind of have the ego strength to go there, right? And that's not a character flaw if they don't.
Right.
It just might be a combination of the environment, or they don't have other support, or they're just not there yet to go to that place, right? Again, you wouldn't want to be in 5th grade if you're still at a 3rd grade level. So to move at their pace of emotional learning, I suppose.
So meeting them where they are, and then what's their next step in the emotional and social learning.
And so sometimes we're trying to build the skills that are going to help them have the tools when we go to that place. I can handle that. I can manage that emotionally. I have the emotional bandwidth or tolerance for that.
That's a lot to navigate because I'm sure you see all different ranges.
I do.
What is your caseload?
So at any given time, I'll have 30 patients that I'm seeing for the individual appointments, and then assessments sprinkled in the mix of that as well.
And there's their group work as well?
I used to facilitate groups, and because of access to services and attendance and different nuances of that systemic nuances, they decided not to continue those particular groups and for the clinicians in the program to just carry a caseload of individual patients.
So tell us, what is it like when you meet with one of your patients? Where do you meet? What does it look like?
So I have an office, a few different offices in different places. I have an office in like a central health area where I see some of the individuals that I work with. And then on a couple of the yards, there's office space where I meet with them. The walls are white. It's very sterile. It's a medical space. There's even like, a bed that you would see at a doctor's office to lay down on if they're going to evaluate you or do an exam. That's in there. So it's pretty barren, but it's a room, and they sit in a chair and I sit in a chair, and I'm at a desk and have a computer and all of that. In the office space in the central health building, there is, we call them therapeutic modules. It's essentially a cage. And it's typically used for the individuals who are housed in solitary confinement, just for safety reasons. Not all of them are back there because they're violent or aggressive, but some are. And so that's standard protocol. However, because my appointments are a bit longer than many other providers who are offering services there, they put the therapeutic module there so that the officers don't have to remain right outside the door at all times, because now there's a barrier.
Okay.
So they remain in the cage, as you call it, and then you're on the outside of the cage.
Yes, at my desk.
Wow.
Okay. I can picture it now.
I can picture it too.
Well, thank you. Well, one of the things that we wanted to have you share with our listeners is the story of, and really the heart of this episode is creating empathy. As teachers, Christine and I really believe we want to understand where our students are. We want to understand where they're coming from. So we've been students before. We still always are learning something new. But you wanted to really understand what your patients were going through. So can you Give us an idea of what you wanted to develop empathy for your patients. So what did you think about doing one weekend?
I incarcerated myself in my bathroom for a weekend. And it happened a bit spontaneously, actually. It wasn't something I had really been thinking about. When I worked in juvenile hall, I had asked one of the probation staff there if he would be willing to lock me in one of the empty rooms for a little while just to kind of get a sense of what it was. He didn't, which is okay. So back then, I think these seeds were planted, but this is how the experiment sort of came about. At the time, I was facilitating groups, and the prison had just come off of a lockdown that had been pretty extended. And when they came back to group, I was asking a lot of questions about how it was, how they were doing, how they got through it before we segued into the content and material that we were there for, right? This is an experience they're having. Let's give some space to process that. And one of my patients goes, well, just imagine living in your bathroom. And I was like, started thinking about it, and I'm like, my bathroom is about the size of their cells. And I wonder what that would be like. I happen to have a bathroom with a bathtub, so that would make an easy bed.
So comfortable.
Well, their beds are metal racks. Oh. So it's like a bunk bed style, and then they're essentially metal racks, and they have something you guys are probably both familiar with, those like mats for nap time.
Right. Oh, yes.
They're maybe a little bit thicker than the ones you might have in like preschool or kindergarten, but a mat sort of like that. So
do they have a pillow?
They do not have a pillow.
Wow.
Which was something I learned when I prepared for this experiment. Many of them, sometimes if someone like sews or knows how to do that, like they can make pillows and buy them. They're probably not supposed to, but
using a t-shirt or something.
Or they'll pull stuffing out of a mattress, and then they'll get like a sheet, and someone will sew a pillow. But that's less commonplace. What I learned from, I think now actually they can buy pillows from Canteen, or that's something that's coming.
And then do they have a blanket?
They do have a blanket. At the time I did the experiment, what I learned about how they make a pillow if they want one is they take their extra sets of clothes and they put it in their laundry bag, and they use that.
Oh.
So that's what I did for the experiment. I took a couple of sweatshirts, which are probably much cozier than some of their clothes, but I did the best I could, and I put them inside of a pillowcase, and I used that as a pillow in my bathtub.
And then you had like a little mattress in your bathtub.
I have a softer, more plush blanket that I used as like underneath, because it was a little bit cushier, but I could fold it enough that it had a few layers to act as a bit of a mattress. And then I used the blankets they have are like very thin, kind of knit style blanket, just one. So I just had one like that.
So
that I used.
So you prepared physically what you were going to take with you and keep with you. And then what sort of rules did you set for yourself? When did you go in? Did you go in Friday and come out Sunday?
I went in Friday and came out Sunday before I was meant to go to bed for the night for work the next day.
Okay.
And I didn't set the rules. I let my patients set the rules, which I actually think was like, I don't know if they realized this, but may have been a bit empowering for them for a couple of reasons, to have a sense of authority over somebody else's experience, which is the opposite of what they experience every day. And it turned what they're going through into something in a certain way a little bit more lighthearted, because as they were doing it, they started having a lot of fun with it. And I think part of that was like, oh yeah, we have to make her do that. And it was that, again, that bit of that sense of control. I actually brought it with me. Everything they had written down.
Oh, this is great.
I want to hear.
So this might not be something that people are familiar with, but at least in the California prison system, there are tablet devices that they can now use, and they have access to phone calls on there and some texting and some other applications. It's all very monitored, of course. At the time, they already had those tablets in place. And so they wrote out like when the tablets turn on, when the messaging is available, when the phones on the tablets are on or off. So they gave me some time frames for that. So the way I set it up on my phone was I created a customized do not disturb. This was actually a really interesting part of the experiment for me. I was nervous to tell my parents, which helped me understand part of what they might feel when they get arrested and they have to make that first phone call, right? Obviously for very different reasons. I was nervous to tell my parents because I thought my parents would be like, what are you doing? You're weird. Why are you doing that? But I told my mom, and that particular weekend, she and my stepdad happened to be going out of town. And she said to me, well, your grandmother is here and we're out of town. You need to be available to her. And of course, I was going to make sure that she was able to call me if she needed to in an emergency. But the thought I had was like, that is not a luxury that my patients have. And if I'm really doing this experiment, then I wouldn't. My phone would be inaccessible to incoming calls.
Right.
But I didn't set it up that way because I wanted to make sure if anything happened with my grandma that I could be available. So I customized a do not disturb so that there were no incoming calls. And then there were a limited number of free text messages on the tablets at that time. So I limited myself to that. I think it was 20 number of texts for the whole weekend.
Who did you find yourself texting when you were?
That's a good question. I had one of my friends at the time, he was a huge part of my support system because of other personal things. I was going through a breakup at that time, and he was somebody I was talking to more regularly. And he knew what I was doing. So definitely him.
Yeah.
It was really not too many people,
Right.
I think, what I found. So I was pretty isolated. It was like I was in solitary confinement,
Yeah.
honestly.
Did you have any sort of books or magazines? Or?
So I also went into the experiment thinking this is going to be so profound. I'm going to read multiple books. I'm going to journal a lot and have all these really amazing thoughts
So
and
you had
insights.
preconceived notions about what the experience was going to be like.
I did.
Interesting.
And then I did it, and I didn't want to do anything. I was so unmotivated, which turned into like being very hard on myself. Like, you're so useless. What are you doing with your time?
Wow.
You have nothing else to do. I just watched a lot of TV. They can have TVs in their cells. They can purchase them. They're like very old school. They look like little miniature small computer screens, essentially. So I used my computer as a TV. I happened to be really immersed going into it already in this prison show. So it's called Mayor of Kingstown. It's amazing. So I felt like I was in prison a little bit watching it, but it set the tone, I guess. So I just found myself watching a lot of TV. When I would try to read, it felt really challenging. My mental bandwidth just wasn't there. But from time to time, I did find myself journaling, which was good. Had some interesting stuff come up there, if I remember correctly. Some things that I shared when I came back to my patients, but now it evades me. I tried to find the journal before I came, but I could only find this. In case you're curious, because you also asked about earlier about what's like a normal day like for them there, they did give me a sense of that as well in terms of in-cell time. Here, cell living schedule, no half-stepping, they wrote.
Oh.
And no half-step, like don't half-ass it.
Oh, okay.
Is that appropriate
Yeah.
to say on
Yeah,
a
you can
family-friendly
you can say that.
podcast?
You could say that.
Tools for daily activities. 1 floor towel to sweep the cell. 1 floor towel for a bird bath. If you don't know what a bird bath is, they basically plug their sinks and fill it with soap and water, and then they use that to bathe themselves outside of when they have the ability to utilize the shower.
Wait, so 1 bird bath, one
One towel to sweep the cell, 1 towel for a bird bath, a shower bag and shower sandals, a laundry bucket, and a green scrub pad for my toilet bowl. What else did they write? Try to bird bath using buckets in your tub or shower.
Did you do it?
I tried. It was a massive failure. First of all, my sink doesn't like the little part of the drain that you like. I have a sink where you push that down so that it's plugged and it doesn't push down anymore. So I couldn't fill it up. So I was like having the sink running, trying to wash myself. Water was getting everywhere. I gave up really quickly. They also a lot of them are very immaculate about the way they keep their cells and they clean them every day. A lot of people from prison actually leave prison with a bit of OCD. I think part of that is they have so much time on their hands and not a lot to do a lot of the time. And so just moving things or everything having its place or keeping it clean.
It's what they can control.
It's what they can control, exactly. And so they were telling me beforehand, the floor towel to sweep this up and get a bucket and fill it with water and wipe your floor. That's how we start the morning. No, I absolutely did not do that. It just did not happen. I was unwilling to. That's where I was like, you're so lazy, you're so useless, which again, the empathy, right? Like for other reasons, a lot of them carry a lot of shame and their self-concept is just so low. What is my life and who am I being in this environment? So it helped my own version of understanding that because of how I wasn't willing to use the time or couldn't find the motivation for that.
It's interesting that the motivation was so challenging for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's just having that time of being by yourself and having this containment?
I think that's a good question. I hadn't really reflected on the reasons why. If I do give it some thought, I was moving through a lot emotionally at that time with the relationship that in my life that had ended. And that is something I had been processing a lot in my own therapy and with different friends and different people in my life. It was like constant on my mind. And so now that I was in this isolated space with not a lot of distractions, my mind just had so many thoughts and feelings it was moving through that like trying to sit and read, I just would read the sentence over and over again. And my mind just didn't have the space for some of that. And then being isolated, it just doesn't feel good. And I was physically uncomfortable a lot of the time. There's no place to sit.
Yeah. Where did you sit?
So I sat in the bathtub most of the time, which was so uncomfortable. And every once in a while, if I needed to feel like I was like sitting in a chair, I would sit on the toilet, which I know sometimes they do, or they have like a bucket that they'll sit on.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. It gives you a whole new perspective. Wow. Did it feel like a really long weekend?
Yeah. It felt like it went on forever. And I've had thoughts about doing it again just to like, remind myself. And every time I do, I was telling one of my patients this recently, every time I do, immediately the idea gets dismantled and I decide not to, which is such a luxury, right? Like even in that, right? I work with people. One person I worked with, the greatest amount of time I've ever had a patient tell me they've been incarcerated for is 50 years. Oof. But I work with people who've been incarcerated sometimes for 20, 30, 40 years already. And so, to not even consider wanting to do another weekend in my own bathroom. It's pretty profound, right?
Yeah. What surprised you most from having this weekend in the bathroom?
What surprised me most?
Probably not realizing how unmotivated you would be because you went in with a preconceived notion that like, oh, I'm going to read books, I'm going to journal, I'll have a little staycation in my bathroom. But that didn't happen.
It didn't. Yeah. So maybe that, something that wasn't a surprise, but really also helped me understand the people I work with and their substance use. I am thankfully not in recovery from drug addiction. I am in recovery from an eating disorder. I found myself going to food a lot in the moments of boredom or in the moments where I wanted to get out of my head. And so it helped me really understand that impulse, that compulsion, and how mindless it almost becomes to just go straight to it without thinking and how mind-numbing it can be. So, which felt like it was needed some of the time I was in there. So a lot of times they'll identify, most of the time, the first trigger for their substance use that most of them will say is boredom. And I think boredom has so many layers to it, but it helped me understand that at face value, that like boredom is boredom in its own right.
So did you have access to food the whole time, or did you allow yourself like certain times to eat?
So I did not have any refrigerated food. The way I did it was I brought in, and they have access to those who can afford to shop at the store. Maybe they have families who put money on their books, or however they're able to afford that, they can buy once a month. They can go to Canteen or Store is what it's called, and buy different things from there that they then have in their cells all the time until they run out of it, outside of the meals that are provided by the prison. So I brought some snacks in, like ahead of time I bought some snacks, like all dried goods, right? And then for lunch, they're given a sack lunch, either a bologna sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I'm vegan, so bologna was off the table. And I hate peanut butter and jelly together, so I just made peanut butter sandwiches for the few days.
I'm guessing they don't have that luxury of saying, I'm vegan, or...
You know, they can have there's different diets. There's like a kosher diet.
great.
I think you could do, I'm not sure vegan or vegetarian, but really you'd be eating like lettuce, rice, and beans.
Right.
I'd starve if I went to prison. So hopefully I don't plan on committing any crimes. Hopefully that never happens. So I had peanut butter sandwich for lunch. It's a hot commodity in prison are soups, ramen soups, like similar to cup of noodle. I think the brand is ramen.
Okay.
And so I bought a couple of vegan ones ahead of time from the store. And so I had that for dinner, I think, every night, because some of them will cook in their cells. They have like a hot pot and they have ways to use that to cook. And I didn't really have a way to make that happen. And I didn't want to use my stove. That felt like cheating. So I just stuck with the soups, and I brought my coffee. I think I emailed the pictures to you this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them, but I brought my coffee pot into the bathroom and used that as like my hot pot for hot water and stuff. Yeah.
And I noticed in your picture, you covered up your mirror.
I covered up my mirror. It's my understanding, I haven't been in a cell. It's my understanding that maybe it's not like a glass, it's like a reflective, like a small little
Like
metal situation. But they don't really get to really look at themselves. I decided to cover up my mirror.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Did they write in that you could have a recess, a break?
So I used that time to still go to Pilates. I did not drive there. I live about, I want to say 1.5 to 2 miles away. So I walked, and this was in summer. So it was hot. It was brutal, but I walked there and went to Pilates, had my little workout, and walked home.
You've shared that while the experience was eye-opening, you were not in a constant fight or flight state like your clients. Can you explain that difference?
Sure. I think we had touched on that earlier, that they're still living in an environment where lots of different things happen, and they have to be aware of that and prepared for that and keep themselves safe. And they also have law enforcement around all the time controlling their lives. And for people who've experienced abuse, neglect, where authorities undermined itself in their personal lives, violence that they've experienced outside of prison, now they're in an environment where all of that is condensed and concentrated, maybe is the word I was looking for. They're on alert all the time. They have to be prepared for anything that could happen. Obviously wasn't my experience, right? And that's a similar point to being in solitary confinement and how it can be peaceful sometimes, right, for them. So I was by myself. Even for them in their cells, like they don't always necessarily have a cellmate that they know very well or that they feel like they can trust. And even if they do, we're talking about people who have a hard time trusting. So even allowing yourself to like go to sleep knowing there's someone else in the cell with you and what could happen, right? So these are things I did not have to think about.
So what did that help you understand about like the psychological toll of being incarcerated?
My experience, I think, helped me understand the mental fortitude and the pieces of being isolated, the pieces of being disconnected from your loved ones, the lack of meaning in your time, less the things about safety and what it means to be safe. But now that we're talking about it, I can reflect on, I'm able to understand that through the contrast of my experience. The disconnection from loved ones and the ability to be around them, but the ability to be there for them. And that's something that a lot of the people I've gotten to know there really struggle with, that they've had roles sometimes in their families where they're a provider or whatever their role may be, And now, even from a young age. And so now not to be able to be there while their families are going through things. So not just their need to spend time with their families, but their need and ability to be there for the people they love and what that does to their self-worth also.
Yeah, that must take a psychological toll. That makes sense.
How did your clients respond when you shared your experience?
They were so curious. It was the first thing they asked about when I saw them next. And they were really also interested in a lot of the questions you guys were asking, like, what was it like for me? What was my mindset like? How did I spend my time? So they had a lot of curiosity. I shared a couple of things that I had journaled because I did do a little bit of reading. It was some sort of philosophical, maybe that's why too. I picked something that was like really intellectual, which probably I needed something more leisure. But yeah, they were really interested in probing into like my frame of mind.
Yep.
And a lot of them were really appreciative that anyone would do something like that to try to understand pieces of their experience and put themselves in their shoes. So I know that meant a lot to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, did it deepen your therapeutic relationship with these guys?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Or trust, or
that like who would be, for most of them, no one has ever really even verbally made an effort to understand their life experience, and not just incarceration, right? Like things they went through or when they had trauma, to give that the space and the attention it deserves to be heard. And here I am like experientially putting myself in their world and trying to understand. So
Well, bravo to you.
thank you.
it's a great story.
They get all the credit. They do. They deserve it.
So let's shift it over to carrying empathy throughout our life. So, Amanda, how can we practice empathy in everyday life, especially with people whose choices or circumstances we don't understand?
I think just to be curious and open-minded, and to ask questions, and to be in touch with your own intuition. I quoted Brene Brown earlier, and I'll quote her again. There's a video short that was made from one of her TED Talks, I believe. And the essence of what she says about empathy is that in order to recognize an emotion or an experience in somebody else, we have to be willing to connect with that kind of emotion or experience within ourselves. And so I think empathy also requires a level of self-awareness. For me, I'm in my own therapy. I think behind every good therapist is an even better one. And so in terms of my role therapeutically, to continue to deepen my relationship with myself, and when I'm talking to anybody, whether they're my patients, whether it's a friend, a family member, a stranger on the street, that I'm connected to the emotional experience I'm having with this person, because whatever emotions are coming up for me are telling me something about what's happening between us, or what may be happening for them, or why I'm having that reaction. Therapeutically, I can then bring that in with my patients and then explore, how are we impacting each other here? Why might that be happening? If I'm having compassion and that's not something they're used to, right? So self-awareness, I think, is a really important part of that.
That's a lifelong journey too. The self-awareness. I love that. Being curious, asking questions. Tell me more.
What could you say to parents and educators who are listening? What can we do early on to build emotional safety, resilience, and connection in children?
I think just be a place for children to land with their feelings and with their behaviors. Learn to separate out the feeling from the behavior. So I think this is especially true when dealing with kids who have maybe more challenging behaviors. Our instinct is to want to correct that, especially maybe in a teaching environment where then it can be disruptive to the class, right? But to be able to, when you interact with that child, be curious about what the behavior is trying to actually communicate. And in the language that you message to that child, when you ask what's going on and they share that with you, I understand that you're feeling that way and the feeling is valid, but the behavior is not okay or safe for X, Y, or Z reason.
Separate the feeling from the behavior. Okay, that's really good. Thank you.
I think that's where so many children, whether they come from backgrounds like the people I've worked with or any child, internalize negative, unintentionally, a lot of negative messages, because as we're correcting the behavior, the child doesn't know that the feeling, like they're just acting out of their emotion or a need, and they may not have a way to communicate that. Like, we're not going to shame a baby for crying because it needs its diaper change. It doesn't have the language or the words or the verbal capacity. And so same with children, we start to look at them like, oh, now they can talk or now they can do this. And we forget that there's so much stuff going on underneath that they don't understand in their inner world. And so as soon as we go to corrective action, we're shaming the feeling, which is tangled up in the behavior for the child.
And everyone has a story, and we don't know everyone's story, and we don't know what happened the night before, and they're in our classroom. So I think, listeners, it's important to reflect on who might be carrying an unseen story.
I mean, we've seen in the classroom where a student will come in and they're just off. And we're like, what went on the night before or the morning before they were dropped off at school? So it's always like a bit of a puzzle.
And I would say also to parents, and it's important to communicate with teachers, like if there's something big happening at home, because sometimes a child will come in and there'll be behavior all day long, and then someone will say, oh, their grandparent just passed away, or there's somebody sick in the family. And it's so important to know these things.
This part of the conversation is reminding me of a poem I had come across many years ago, and I think it's so profound. It's short, and I'd love to read it. Please. It's called "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil." I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket, 'cause ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark, 'cause the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready, 'cause my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed, 'cause I ain't got a pencil.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a beautiful poem. Who wrote that?
Joshua T. Dickerson.
I ain't got a pencil.
Oh, I like it. Thank you. All right. Whew. Let's go into Big Little Lessons.
Let's do it.
All right. So, Christine, what did you take away from Amanda's wonderful talk?
I think understanding that we were all children once, and like, what is our experience, and to never to judge, always to be curious, always to be supportive. I think people that you meet that may be challenging or difficult, what's their story? Getting to hear people's stories.
Some of the ones that have stayed with me, just what you just said, was separating the feeling from the behavior and recognizing it, because we can get swept up in emotions. And it's so true. Like, people don't wake up generally to say, really, I want to be annoying all day long.
Right.
There's usually a reason behind it.
Right.
We've heard the quote, hurting people hurt people. But it helps me to understand, just reminding myself of that, because when I think about people who are in prison, there is a stigma of, well, they deserve to be there. And to understand that they are human beings, we all make mistakes. So I think your work is so important, and being curious and asking their stories.
And the level of empathy that you have is so incredible. It makes me want to have more empathy towards people.
Absolutely. What gives you hope in this work that you're doing, Amanda?
Oh, my patients and the way that they show up to face their demons, their pain, their struggle, the capacity they continue to have for their own humanity and trying to stay connected to that when they have so many reasons not to, that they still long for relationship and connection and to be seen. And so even in a place where, like you just said, the misconception would be they deserve to be there, or there's, a lot of negativity, it's dangerous, and it can be, but that there are people who are choosing to heal in ways that people who aren't incarcerated might never choose to because they don't have to in a way. They haven't lost it all. We take things for granted a lot of the time. And now we're talking about people who are at a rock bottom that none of us could fully understand. As much as I try to understand and have that empathy, I also know that there are things I can't understand. And so the fact that at least in the time I get to spend with them and in the therapeutic relationship and space that's there, in those moments, they choose to show up for themselves, and that makes the world a better place. Maybe that's one less person causing harm to somebody else or breaking the cycle for their own children too.
Oh, that's a good point.
The ripple effect.
So what have they taught you about resilience and humanity in general?
That's a big question.
It's such a big question.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, so much. But that we all have it and we all have the capacity for that. And they are often my biggest inspiration when things feel challenging in my life. There have been moments where I've said to myself about specific patients, okay, if he can do that, right? If he can push through his urge to use substances, or he can get through that day after he just lost somebody he cares about, then I can do this, right? And so, yeah, just how vast our resilience and inner strength actually is.
That's beautiful. All right, Amanda, we're going to shift our direction and go into a speed round. So it's just quick questions and say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Before this job, I was a night owl. Since this job and the schedule, I am now a morning person.
What time do you have to leave to go drive out there?
So I leave at 5:30. I wake up at 4:30.
Well, welcome to our world.
Yeah, exactly.
You can call us in the car.
Yes, you could.
Perfect.
All right, coffee, tea, or something else?
Coffee in the morning, tea at night.
Quality you see in your clients that inspires you.
Vulnerability.
Something people might be surprised to learn about your work.
That it's fun.
A way you personally reset after a heavy day.
So many things, but definitely at the top, Pilates and a home-cooked meal.
Nice. A book or resource that has shaped your perspective.
I know I referenced Brene Brown, anything by her, and that would be more for like shame, vulnerability, empathy. Gabor Mate, he's amazing in the world of trauma and addiction. And my favorite psychologist, Carl Jung.
Oh, wow. Music, silence, or a podcast on your drive home?
Music.
One misconception people have about incarceration.
I mean, you kind of already said it, but that the people there deserve to be there.
Yeah, they need to do their time and be miserable every day.
Yeah, and accountability is important, but how we hold people accountable matters too.
That is really beautiful. Thank you, Amanda.
What's a word that represents healing to you?
Well, I said vulnerability already, but I would say here vulnerability too. And I think human connection. A lot of healing happens through our connection.
A simple joy outside of work that fills you up.
My dog, Archie.
Archie. Wonderful. Could you share maybe a big little lesson that your clients have taught you?
People just want to matter, and everybody does matter. And I think this might be a good place to share the story of my client, my patient from juvenile hall. When I worked with him in juvenile hall, it was very brief. He was very closed off and guarded, very psychologically well defended for so many valid reasons in his life. And so we really didn't have much of a relationship or rapport. And at the prison years later, I saw his name on my schedule for the day, and I recognized it, but didn't really know from where. And he didn't show up to his appointment. And when they don't show up, we have to go get their signature on a form that they acknowledge that they missed the appointment. And so when I went to go get that from him, then I saw his face and he looked kind of familiar to me. And so I asked him if he had been at the juvenile hall that I had worked at. And he was like, I was. And I was like, I remember you. And all of a sudden I had this like flashback, I guess, in my mind of sitting at like the steel tables in the day room right next to each other on the metal like stools that are attached to the table, sitting there looking at him, and he's not saying anything to me and I don't know what to say to him. And we're just kind of caught in the stuckness of all of that at that time from juvenile hall. And something that he shared with me was like how impactful it was for him that I remembered him, and that it was the reason he chose to be open to the help that I was offering him now through our program, that meant something to him. That just me remembering him, even though we had never really talked, we had never like built that connection, that like, oh, like why would she remember me, right? And something about that showed him that he mattered and had left some sort of impact on me enough to remember. And so that we all just want to matter.
Mm-hmm. It's a great story. Such a small thing, but not a small thing.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, Amanda, thank you for inviting us into a world that many of us don't often see or fully understand, and for helping us recognize the humanity, the resilience, and possibility for growth in every person.
This conversation reminds us that every adult was once a child, and when we choose curiosity over judgment, we create space for empathy, connection, and meaningful change.
All right, here's a simple piece of our homework. Pause before making a quick judgment of someone else or even yourself and gently ask, what might be underneath this?
What might be underneath this? Mm-hmm. So if this episode resonated with you, we'd love to stay connected. Come find us on Instagram at Teach Big Little Lessons, or reach out anytime at teachbiglittlelessons@gmail.com, because we truly value hearing from your stories and reflections. So reach out.
We don't have all the answers, but we have a lot of experience.
And we're learning right alongside you. So until next time.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.